Beneath the grey skies lies a concrete jungle with a veil of deception that covers the long roads and winding paths of everyday life. In recent times, we have uncovered some traders playing a dangerous game of selling dodgy meats.
Ni makosa sana mkiwa pale, alafu management kama manager hivi akujagundue mnatupa nyama, mnaleta hasara, iko na consequences zake.
People want to make quick money.
In the long term, we're going to affect the health of our citizens.
Half a kg. Yeah. But there is another dance between money and greed, tuning the health of the innocent and somehow forcing them to make small steps against sickening odds.
It's a complex scenario which is associated with a lot of issues.
Tonight, my investigation lifts the dark veil in the meat industry and tricks used by butchers in a world so corrupt and broken because of toxic selfish interests. The meat industry in the country has thrived for decades. Different cuts, different prices for different recipes. There is a high demand for meat products in the country. Mutton, chicken and pork, but beef tops the list. Injecting chemicals into meat to prolong shelf life is not an uncommon practice in the country and other parts of the world. It's an old practice. A source demonstrated to us how some poultry distributors and retailers inject chicken with water mixed with this animal protein, mainly pork and beef or protein powder. The solution is mixed together to help the protein hold the water once injected into the chicken. The solution is forced into the muscles of a chicken, and sometimes binding agents in the solution are used to prevent the water from leaching out of the chicken or meat during cooking. Before you dig into your favorite dish, a supermarket insider tells us a dirty little secret.
Nyama wakati inaletwa, wale management wa pale mahali unafanya kazi, nyama haifai kuharibika ikiwa mkononi mwenu. Kwa sababu kwao hiyo ni loss, na wanajaribu kuminimize nini loss. So kuna kemikali hivi kama chumvi, na kufanana kama chumvi, ambao sana sana tukunatilia kwa hizi minced meats kwa sana, na hizi nyama tunapaka kama cubes hivi, zinakuwa kama kwa masahani hivi zimepakiwa, alafu zimekuwa pale kwa display. Yes.
Hiyo chemical mnapatiwa na management ya supermarket?
Mtu mmoja anasainiwa pale kwa section ya butchery, ambapo mtu ile wakati hiyo chemical inaisha anaenda kwa tuseme accountant ama chief finance hivi kwa ofisi, anapewa pesa, alafu unaelekezwa mahali kampuni kwa pande za industry area. Do.
Unasema ni ngapi?
Ita punch.
Wanakupatia receipt?
Yeah.
Our insider, who works for one of the leading supermarkets, took us to the industrial area in Nairobi, where they buy the chemical.
SMS. Sinaweza tosha kilo?
Kilo 5 ni 600. So it's like 7.
Pani hivi. Kilo hii itakuwa sawa.
He has worked as a butcher in several branches of the supermarket in Nairobi. Not anyone can buy the chemical here. They have a strict name for it, and it's purchased at a particular hour of the day. He pays and leaves with 4 kilos of the chemical. The chemical we bought is called sodium metabisulfite, and the street name is dawa ya nyama or SMS. It is a white powder used as a disinfectant, antioxidant, and a preservative agent.
The issue of use of chemicals by butchers and by traders within the meat value chain is not a new thing. The only thing that happens is that of late the issues have been on the rise.
Mimi kama mteja nikikuja kununua nyama, nikiona pale kwa display, nitajua hii nyama imewekwa chemical ama haijawekwa, ama nitajuaje hii iko na chemical?
Hauwezi jua, sababu hata tukifanya unafanya huko nyuma, aidha kwa cold room pande ya nyuma, yani mteja, hiyo ni lazima yani isiaje julikana. So ilikuwa ni kitu imefichilika tu yani. So after kuchanganya sasa ndio nyama unaibeba unaileta sasa kwa display. Lakini si ati unachanganya hapo mbele ya mteja hivi ama mali watu wanakuona.
Hiyo chemical inafaa kwa hiyo nyama kwa muda gani?
Unajua ile ni biashara. Wapo nyama itakaa hata kama ni siku 3 ama siku 5, wa expect useme ati nyama imeoza ama imeharibika.
Our insider told us diced beef and minced meat are the easiest to lace with a chemical and trendy, especially for mothers who choose to wean their babies.
Sana sana pale butchery unapata kuna mama ambao wamekuwa na watoto wachanga hivi, sasa anataka kuanza kunyonya, amekuwa kinyonyesha, sasa anataka kuanza kufundisha ule mtoto chakula, ile solid food yani. Mara mingi wale wa mama kama chukui fillet ya samaki, alikuwa anakuambia kama si tilapia fillet, anakuambia anakuja kwa minced meat. So pale sasa unapata yani ile utu yani ndani yangu pia naona yani mtoto mchanga labda kuna mwaka mmoja hivi, miezi ama mwaka mmoja na miezi hivi, na naona mtoto hii kitu utapewa labda kwa baada ya siku 2 hivi, na ule mtoto bado anaendelea kunenepa. So inakuwa yani unaona hata ule mtoto yani labda hata atapata madhara juu ya chemical. Juu ya chemicali na si vizuri.
Whatever the mother takes in, that is what the baby is receiving. And in the long term, probably this child might have some health problems. I'm not sure, but what if they developed asthma? What if they started getting that wheezing and coughing or got into shock? You know, nobody is going to think that it's because of the meat that this baby was eating.
So we bought the chemical he was talking about, and this is 1 kilo of sodium metabisulfite. This is what they use to redden the meat and to make it look fresh. So we have 1 kilo of meat here, and what we want to do, we want to put the solution in one of the bowls and see how this goes. So we'll have the fresh meat here, and he's going to mix it up and show us how they actually do it at the supermarket.
Ile wakati tunaingia kazi pale asubuhi ndio wakati inaitwa production time. Ndio unapata pale sasa ile wakati asubuhi ndio nyama tunaweza kuzipanga kwenye display. Kama kuna nyama ambazo zilikuwa za jana yake na zikuisha, tunazirepackage wakati asubuhi. Na hiyo wakati asubuhi sana sana sasa ndio unapotelea kemikali kabla wale watu pale supermarket kuanze kuona wateja, ndio tu tunachanganya nyama.
So mnafanyaje?
So vile tunafanya ni unachukua bakuli, unaweka maji kulingana na kwa kitu kama kibakuli hivi unaweka. Ukishaweka maji unachukua sasa ile kemikali. Kemikali nayo unaweka kulingana na nyama. Kama ni nyama unataka kuweka, kama nyama ni kilo 6 ama kilo 5, kulingana na yani ukubwa, yani quantity ya nyama ndio unachanganya. Sababu ukika zaidi ya sana, ukika mingi zaidi, ile kemikali inachoma ile nyama. Unapata ile nyama inaanza kuwa kama nyeusi hivi. Na ikiwa nyeusi, wale wateja wataweza kufanya nini? Wataweza kuinunua. So lazima uchanganye ile kemikali upate inaingiana na
You balance.
Yeah, you balance.
So the main aim ya kuiweka ni
the main aim ya kuweka hii chumvi kwanza kabisa ni ya kusaidia ile nyama hata kama itakaa pale siku 2-3 iweze kubaki ikiwa nini? Fresh. Lakini pia zaidi ya hiyo, hii kemikali pia inaweza saidia ile nyama iweze kuwa more appealing, rangi yake ibaki vile vile na iweze kukaa fresh yani. Na pia zaidi ya hiyo unapata ile nyama pia hii inatoa pia harufu, kemikali pia inatoa, unapata ina mnuko hivi, haitanukia kama inaoza yani.
Na mbona umevaa gloves?
Hii kemikali inadhuru pia mikono. Haswa kama uko na mali umekatwa hivi, inakuwa ni shida. So tulikuwa tunasisitizwa sana, lazima usikuje into contact nayo.
Na wakati huo mnachanganya kemikali kwa nyama, wale wafanyikazi wengine pale supermarket wanajua ni nini wa mnafanya pale?
Karibu wafanyikazi wote ambao washafanya kazi supermarket ama wanaweza kuelezea, wanajua.
Na ukipima unapima tu kwa macho?
Unapima tu kwa macho, ni kitu ambacho ukikaa pale hivi utaweza kujua tu polepole tu, yani utaweza kufundishwa na wenzako pale, uweze kuelezewa hii inatosha hii kiwango, utaweza tu kutumia macho tu, yani kujua. So unaichanganya na maji hadi pale ina dissolve ndani. Section dissolve, unakuja sasa unaimwagia sasa kwa ile nyama hivi, kiwango kama hiyo. Kisha mwagia hivyo juu yake, sasa unakuja unaichanganya, unaichanganya. But hii nyama ikiwa kwa hii bakuli hivi, hii nyama naweza kupatia garantia kwamba inaweza kaa hapa hivi kesho kutwa bado itakuwa hivi, na hata itaendelea labda kuwa hata zaidi ya vile unaiona sasa hivi. So wakati mmemaliza hivi sasa, ndio mnaweka kwa zile matray kubwa zile za pale kwa display, ndio mna present sasa pale mbele.
How bad is the situation now?
The situation we might not be able to authoritatively say quantify, but if you listen to the few traders I have been able to speak to, they tell you this is something this is something we do, but do not mention us because we have to survive.
We took the 2 bowls of meat which our insider had prepared on a Tuesday afternoon, and this is what the meat looked like 5 days later. Our insider was spot on. The first bowl with the chemical had a bright red color, looked better, juicier and fresh after 5 days without any refrigeration. There was no smell. The second bowl without the chemical had a brown yellowish slime coating on the meat, which had changed color with an overwhelming stench filling the air.
And the public also needs to be aware. They need to look at the meat. If it's so colorful, it looks like it's almost from a storybook. I mean, this is not real. They need to avoid this kind of meat. Meat naturally should attract flies if it's in a rural area, say. But if it doesn't, it means something is just not right.
For it to be a good preservative for the raw meat, you need to have very high amounts of it for it to have an effect. Yeah? The small amounts which are recommended will not have an effect on its preservation of the red meat.
Our insider further told us there was another dirty secret.
So mkiingia asubuhi, wale watu ambao wanafungua kazi asubuhi pale, kitu ya kwanza mnapoingia kazi, kabla ile milango ya supermarket ifunguliwe, wateja waanze kuingia, kitu ya kwanza kabisa ni kuchukua zile nyama ambazo zilikuwa kwa display, ambazo zilikuwa zimefunikwa hivi. Wanachukua sasa, wanafanya nini? Wanatoa hizi labeling, hii packaging yake ya jana, na hata kama ile sahani yake ile kama ilikuwa ishapata ile damu hivi stain ile, inabidi pia unatoa ile bakuli unaweka kwa sahani nyingine tena, alafu unakuja unairap tena vingine, unaweka another wrap na another label ambayo itakuwa na date ya kuonyesha the current date.
Many butchers using this shortcut fear losing customers in the long run, but ride on the ignorance of many unsuspecting buyers. I sought to find out from our insider what happens to the meat laced with the sodium metabisulfite if no one buys it after a couple of days.
Pale kwa supermarket bado kuna section ya jikoni, kuna bakery, kuna section kadhaa za chakula na kuna fresh. So hii nyama ikikaa sana, tulikuwa bado tunaweza kujua wale ni wenzetu, ni colleagues, na nyama yote yenye wanatumia pale sisi ndio tunawapatia. So badala tuwapatie nyama yenye kwa fresh kabisa, tuwapatie hii ambayo imekakaa, sababu wao wanaenda kupika. Unapata kuna beef stew, kuna saa ingine wanapika pilau, chakula kadhalika tu yani.
For most of us, picking good quality meat is a shot in the dark. This is 1 kilo of sodium metabisulfite, and our insider tells us, back at the butchery section of the supermarket, it was enough for 5 kilos of meat. What does this chemical, sodium metabisulfite, do to the body once it's ingested?
The problem comes in when you have where you don't know how this compound is being used as a preservative and the amounts. That's where the problem comes in.
Okay.
Now, when you talk about the amounts, if the amounts are excessive, one of the things that this compound has been thought to cause is the increase of incidence of respiratory allergies. So some people have asthma, will have now increased incidence of asthma. It basically makes them have more frequent attacks.
People who are sensitive to sulfite, be it in medicine or wherever, if they take that kind of meat, they're going to get some reactions. One of the things that will happen if you take this chemical is you'll notice they have a lot of wheezing, they may start coughing with no explanation, like you've not been exposed to anything, you've not been having a cold, but you start coughing. That's if it is taken in high quantities. And for pregnant women, if they're sensitive to sulfite and they take this kind of meat, then what happens? They'll experience all these symptoms and the flow of oxygen to the baby via the placenta is going to be affected. So that could be a danger for the unborn baby.
We took the chemical to a clinical technologist to help us answer a few questions.
Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you.
So I've brought the chemical for testing.
Oh, this is the one we talked about.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes. What is this chemical, sodium metabisulfite?
The chemical sodium metabisulfite, as you can actually we have it here. Let me want to show you what the chemical is.
And this is the same?
Yeah, they are the same. They are the same as the one you have. It's only that.
Explain why are you wearing gloves? Because the gentleman
Yes.
who was mixing this chemical with the meat
Yes.
was also wearing gloves. Why do you wear gloves here in the lab?
Okay, the reason why we wear gloves in the lab, the chemical like this one is corrosive. It can cause a skin irritation. So for me to protect myself, I have to be in my protective gear. This chemical actually is the chemical we use for doing some investigations in clinical hematology. And as you can see, the chemical is in powder form. Look at what you have brought here. I can open it.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Open it. Look at it. It is in
Powder form.
it is also in powder form. You can see.
It's actually the same.
They are the same. The chemical, from the name sodium metabisulfite, it is actually a combination of sodium and sulfites. And clinically, we use it in the diagnosis of sickle cell anemia. And it can also be used in food industry. Yeah, maybe as a preservative.
Health concerns associated with excessive use of this chemical as a food preservative for consumers sensitive to sulfites forced the U.S. Food and Drug Administration (FDA) to prohibit the use of sodium bisulfite in meats, vitamin B1 food sources, and raw fruit cuts and vegetables such as in salad bars or fresh produce in supermarkets. That was July 8, 1986. The FDA, which is responsible for assuring that foods sold in the U.S. are safe, wholesome, and properly labeled, took another significant step that day towards protecting consumers and ordered disclosure labeling requirement for packaged foods containing detectable levels of sulfites. The FDA regulation based their findings on a government study of some 500 reports of severe allergic reactions, mainly among asthmatics, including 13 deaths.
In the food industry, like those people who are practicing that, the problem is they might not be using the right concentration. And why am I preparing 2% of sodium metabisulfite? So that I don't prepare an increased concentration that is going to affect the cells. I have said that if I suspend these cells in a highly concentrated solution, then cells are going to lose water, okay? Generally, they lose water and they become now chlorinated, okay? So it means, what happens when you take out of the salts?
You feel dehydrated.
Yeah, you feel dehydrated because it now takes away water from the body.
Asthmatic people, seeing the symptoms that come about even in healthy individuals, like wheezing and coughing, they are more exposed and more at risk. And some studies have shown that 5 to 10% of all asthmatics are sensitive to sulfite. That means it can be a danger, and people using this product should not do so because they are endangering the lives of some of the consumers.
What are the long-term effects of this chemical in a human body?
One of the things that this compound does, once you've ingested it, it is a compound that the body is able to break down. But when you break it down, there's one of the compounds that they produce, that's the sulfite. The sulfite is also thought to break other compounds. For example, one of the compounds they break is what we call benzoic acid. That benzoic acid is thought to be carcinogenic.
In layman's terms,
that means it can cause cancer.
Sodium bisulfite works by releasing sulfur dioxide gas, which inhibits bacterial and fungal growth and prevents the discoloration and deterioration caused by common chemical reactions. Using the chemical as a preservative on fresh meat by international standards is illegal.
Some people even medically react to some compounds, and you will consume thinking that it is organic meat which has no chemicals in it, and when you consume you start reacting, and that's why you hear some people saying, I have allergies to meat, to beef. It is not the beef, it is the component within that beef. Some have drug residues, others have those preservatives residues, and now they react, and some people, you realize, they now put an X to consuming beef. Well, actually, it is not the beef that they are reacting to. They are reacting to the components and residues that are in that piece of meat.
Unfortunately, in Kenya, there is no public case study on this chemical nor reported investigation into its use and effects in restaurants, supermarkets, and retailers. The FDA was under pressure from the US Congress after a hearing that featured an emotional testimony by the parents of a 10-year-old girl who died after eating guacamole in a restaurant. The death of Medaya Hesper McPike, who was asthmatic, was the 7th suspected case from a sulfite reaction, according to her doctors, who listed cause of death as brain damage caused by oxygen deprivation following anaphylactic shock, an allergic reaction. The discovery, widely covered in the US press, prompted the State Health Department to issue emergency regulation on the use of sulfites in food. The Mexican restaurant was sued by parents of the 10-year-old girl and 2 food distribution companies. The judge presiding over the 1988 case stated, and I quote, "The 10-year-old girl became seriously ill shortly after eating the guacamole at the defendant restaurant." The judge further said the restaurant was negligent and the product was unreasonably dangerous because they did not contain warnings on the package to alert the restaurant personnel that some asthmatic persons are highly sensitive to sulfites and that sulfites may be dangerous if used in excessive amounts or concentrations. Our investigations led us to the final phase of verifying claims of the presence of sodium metabisulfite in fresh meat from some supermarkets, falsely advertised on displays as fresh meat. So I've brought these 3 samples, and these are from 3 different supermarkets. What exactly are you going to do with these 3 samples here in the lab?
Okay, first of all, what I'm going to do is to measure the weight of these samples. Each of them, I should get the weight. And then I use a method called Monius-Williams method to...
Known as what?
Monius.
Monius.
Yeah, Williams.
Okay.
Method to process all these 3 samples.
That's like a formula.
It's like a formula, or a method rather,
Okay.
whereby now it's the one that is being used mostly and is the easiest one to use, so that we get the content of the sodium metabisulfite in each of these samples, if there is.
How long do you think this will take?
This now will take us 1 week,
Okay.
if we start it right away.
Okay. We bought 3 meat samples from 3 different supermarkets in Nairobi, labeled Sample 1, Sample 2 and Sample 3. We didn't disclose to the lab which supermarkets they came from.
This product is also used by pharma agencies. Those are pharmaceutical agencies. It's also used by textile industries, clothing and textile, whereby they bleach the clothes with it. In such a case, people who are sensitive tend to get that skin contact reaction. They may start getting itchy, they may develop hives or some kind of rashes, but after several washes, you find that they go back to normal. And you see, if one is not aware of this chemical, they'll not even relate the symptoms they experienced prior to all those washes to sodium metabisulfite.
As we waited for the results, another dirty secret that is slowly making its way into our plates is that juicy steak. Unfortunately, some cuts in restaurant kitchens are being held together using meat glue to give the impression you are eating a premium steak. It's another white powdery substance known as transglutaminase or meat glue. The powder binds proteins together where they collect pieces of meat, as this YouTube video shows. The process of making a fake steak is easy by sprinkling the meat glue on the chunks of meat, tossing them around, and wrapping tightly to suck out the air before letting it rest, and then slicing as a normal steak.
You know, it is very soluble. They just mix and spray. And the meat turns as you watch.
It shocks me and it also depresses me, because in the long term, we're going to affect the health of our citizens. Our health systems are also going to be overstrained, and a lot of money is going to go into healthcare as opposed to other development projects.
The FDA says it's safe, but the problem is how it's being used or abused, the quantity of glue getting into the meat, and the issue of stacking up chunks of good meat with the ones having bacteria. Back to our lab test. On the 3 meat samples we bought from 3 different supermarket chains, and Dr. Martha Mwangi had the results for us. Did you find any trace of sodium metabisulfite on the 3 samples we brought here?
Well, in the 3 samples that we obtained, there were traces of sodium metabisulfite in all the 3 samples. In the sample 1, we got 550.4 milligrams per kg. Sample 2 had 547.2 milligrams per kg. And sample 3 had 545.4 milligrams per kg.
What does that mean?
That means the amount is above the recommended amount in food products as a preservative.
The test report shows the weight in grams for each sample we bought, and the results indicate sample 1 at 17.2 grams had 550.4 milligrams of sodium metabisulfite. Sample 2 at 17.1 grams had 547.2 milligrams of the chemical, and the last sample at 17.4 grams contained 545.4 milligrams of the sodium metabisulfite per kilogram of the meat we bought from the 3 supermarkets. Did this result shock you?
In a way, it shocked me, but I was aware that sodium metabisulfite has been used, is being used in meat products, but I was not aware of the amounts that are being used. Yes.
These amounts are higher than
These
what you thought?
amounts are higher, much higher than what I thought.
At what point, in terms of levels, are we then saying this is now dangerous? Going with your results.
Going by these results, anything above 500 has side effects. And then you can also think about the people who are handling these meats. Of course, they handle more than the 500 because this is in one sample.
What's your conclusion in this report?
My conclusion is that the levels you're having in our meat products, one, we are not supposed to have the sodium metabisulfite in our meat products because the other thing is that it inhibits thiamine, vitamin B1 in meat products. So we shouldn't be having these levels.
Do the levels of the chemicals change? Are they any lower when it goes through the cooking process?
No, the levels of sodium metabisulfite do not change with boiling or with cooking. It can only be more concentrated because the meat, the water will evaporate, so you'll have a more concentrated amount.
Are you aware that some supermarkets under your association are putting chemicals in meat?
No, we are not aware. In fact, I think it first came to light when you started the build-up to your article. It is not something we are aware that is happening internally, especially within the membership that we represent. There has been news about chemicals in vegetables, but the story on meat is a new one. We are talking to our members to ensure that they have their numbers right, that we sell 5 kilos a day so you don't buy 10. That way the opportunity or the temptation to do something to keep that meat longer does not arise.
Food standards agencies in some countries in Europe require retailers to label all food with the sodium metabisulfite in concentrations of over 10 milligrams per kilogram. Our test results show the levels are 55 times over those levels and there are no disclosure labels. There is another problem.
And by the way, sodium metabisulfite is not only used on meat products. There are people who are using it on chips. There are people who are using it on fresh fruits and fresh vegetables.
Like they put the chemical on the chips?
They put the chemical on the chips either before or after frying.
To achieve what result?
Well, I think they are tastier with the sodium metabisulfite.
Oh, really?
Yes. They're also using it on fresh fruits to preserve it. As I said, sodium metabisulfite inhibits growth of microbiomes. Those are the bacteria and the fungi. So they can use it to prolong their shelf life. Unfortunately, these are the amounts that we are not able to measure. So we don't know how much sodium metabisulfite that is being used or how it's regulated.
Is it difficult to regulate the food industry in Kenya?
I think the regulations are there, but it's an uphill task to monitor and follow up so as to ensure that everything is done. It's really an uphill task because you find that almost anybody can sell food.
The use of calcium carbide is prohibited. But you see there are people who want to make money. Yeah? What do they do? They can go for it so that they can quicken the ripening of their fruits and that they make cash. And that is now a problem we have in Kenya. Because if the trend is going to continue like that, you can explain the cases of high cancer cases in Kenya that is emanating from maybe the lifestyle. Go and look at bananas, which have been assisted to ripen, in quotes. The skin usually looks yellow, but the stalks usually green. Okay, a natural process of ripening, everything the stalk usually becomes black, and the skin of the fruit becomes yellowish with black spots. But where chemicals are used for ripening, you find that there's no spots. In fact, they use it so that they can move the spots and they can attract now people. This is good.
It is clear some butchers and some supermarkets are using unregulated amounts of the chemical or preservative. The health dangers they are exposing to the health of both the children and adults is worrying.
There's been an increased incidence of cancers, especially in children. Of course, people will argue that maybe diagnosis has improved, access to healthcare has improved, but also I think there's an actual increase of cancers. Yeah, it could be because of lifestyle changes, but some of these chemicals now that are available, the chemicals, artificial foods, artificial chemicals, things you have, the sodium bisulfite, all those are also being now more in the market. They're more available. They're being used by the industries, and we are all prone to it because all of us are eating from the supermarkets. We are all eating from these manufactured foods. We are not eating the food that we used to eat in the village.
You talked about the leukemia cases that are on the rise. Have you identified specific areas where you've seen a big number of these cases?
One of my students is actually doing, we are doing what we call a prevalence study on the children who come to Kenyatta Hospital, let me say specifically. Yeah? And we've identified 2 places at the moment, 3 places actually. One of them within Nairobi environs. The other one is the Nyanza region. The other one is the eastern region, Meru, around Meru, Embu region. So the areas where we've seen like an increased incidence of these cancers. We don't know exactly why from those 3. Yeah, the assumption is maybe better health access, but also changing lifestyle, especially in Nairobi.
A lot of these lifestyle diseases that we are facing as Kenyans could be attributed to some of these chemicals that are in food, and we're actually not even aware, and we are not at a level where we've done studies to either rule out or rule in the effect on our health. So things like hypertension, kidney damage, all result from some of these chemicals that we're exposed to.
Undeclared and unregulated preservatives in meat is not a closely guarded secret anymore. Many retailers value sulfites above other preservatives because they do more than retard spoilage. They keep food looking fresh even when it's not. Since this is happening, what are you going to do about it?
Within the last 1 year, there's been a lot of conversation within the retail sector in regard to food safety. But that discussion has been centered mainly on vegetables and fruits, not on meat. When you first did the promo for your article, we have had discussions inside within ourselves trying to figure out, does this happen within our particular sector, or is it happening within generally people who deal with meat?
Once a chemical is allowed to be used, say as a preservative, it's allowed by a legislation, then it means it is controlled. You cannot use it beyond a controlled concentration. And it means there are instructions on how to prepare the chemical for use.
The critical thing is for the industry to reinstill confidence and trust from consumers on the products they sell. And for consumers, there is need to make informed choices. This is a red alert before Kenyans become the ultimate guinea pigs. Dennis Okari, NTV Investigates.